All right, so there's been, quite a bit of back and forth going on about kids programming, public media in general, and it seems like it's all stemming from some pretty serious accusations that are out there.
Yeah, I think we can call those accusations what they are. Pretty significant claims leveled against NPR and PBS. In particular, its representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's behind a lot of this.
Yeah, it seems like she's been pretty vocal. I mean, recently she was on Newsmax, and she said flat out, NPR and PBS are brainwashing your children. When you hear something like that, you've got to pay attention.
You really do. And it's important, I think, to look at the context here. So the YouTube transcript that we have from the Ring of Fire, it notes that these comments she made were just one day before a congressional hearing that she led. And at that hearing, she actually got to directly question the leaders from both NPR and PBS. So clearly she had this, agenda going into the hearing.
Yeah, she was ready to go head to head with them. And that's really what we're trying to do in this deep dive. We want to look at these claims of brainwashing. What's that all about? And really unpack it based on the information that's presented in that Ring of Fire transcript.
Exactly. I think it's a really important conversation to have, especially in this day and age when accusations and, opinions fly around so quickly. It's crucial to really understand what exactly is being said and what are the immediate responses to it. And we're going to get all of that from this, Ring of Fire source.
So let's get right into it then. What exactly did Representative Greene accuse NPR and PBS of? What were the key points she raised according to the transcript?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, the transcript focuses on her pointing out that these organizations are funded by taxpayers. And then, kind of using that as a jumping off point, she goes on to argue that there's been a noticeable leftward leaning in their content over the years.
Okay, so she's basically suggesting there's some kind of bias in their programming. Did she actually give any specific examples of this shift she's talking about?
She did.
Yeah.
She specifically pointed to a change in programming from, what she called good old Sesame Street to the inclusion of drag queen story time on these networks. That was one example. And then she also claimed that NPR and PBS are actively involved in transing children and brainwashing children about gender identity.
Okay, so some really strong accusations there, especially those last two. And the transcript points out that this wasn't just, some offhand comment. Right?
Oh, no, not at all. The transcript really emphasizes the fact that these statements were made on Newsmax, which is a pretty significant platform. And it was literally the day before this congressional hearing. So the timing of it all is pretty key. And she even, is quoted as saying that the hearing's purpose was to shine an intense spotlight on this specific type of programming.
So she was going into this hearing with a very clear agenda. It also sounds like the transcript touches on her views about the 2024 elections as well.
Right. The transcript mentions that Representative Greene claimed transgender issues played a major role in the Democratic Party's losses in the 2024 elections. So it seems like, these concerns she has about NPR and PBS are tied to her broader political beliefs about the impact of social issues. It's like a central piece of her political viewpoint.
Okay, so we've got Representative Greene's side of things as it's laid out in the transcript. Now let's look at the other side. What kind of counter-arguments or rebuttals does this Ring of Fire transcript offer to those claims?
Well, the transcript doesn't mince words. It calls Representative Greene's statements wrong and even a lie. So, that's pretty clear-cut there. They're definitely not on the same page.
No mincing words there. So let's break this down a little. What does the transcript say about the claim that transgender issues were this huge factor in the 2024 election?
They pretty much say it's just not true. They state that, the idea that transgender issues had a big impact on the way people voted is simply not true. They argue that it was the economy, inflation, and immigration that voters actually cared about. So it's a direct contradiction of what Representative Greene said.
So they're basically saying she's got it all wrong about the election. Now, one of the things that really stands out is this whole drag queen story time accusation. What does the transcript say about that specifically?
So they get pretty detailed here. They state that neither NPR nor PBS has any current or past programming that features drag queen story time. What apparently happened was there was this one isolated incident where a link to a third-party drag queen story hour was accidentally included on one of their websites. But the transcript points out that this link was quickly identified and taken down, and that's the only connection there was.
Okay, so it wasn't some, intentional programming decision or anything. What about this idea that Sesame Street has been, replaced or something?
The transcript makes it clear that Sesame Street is still around. It's still being produced and broadcast, so they're directly refuting the idea that it's been discontinued or, replaced by any of this programming that Representative Greene is talking about. It seems like they're trying to correct the record here.
Yeah, it sounds like they're saying that she's basing her argument on some false information.
That's certainly the impression you get from the transcript.
Okay, so the transcript doesn't just, refute what Representative Greene is saying. It also raises some alternative concerns. It's almost like they're saying, well, if you're really worried about children, maybe you should be looking at other things.
Yeah, they definitely shift gears and tried to highlight other areas where they believe concern about child safety is more warranted.
And what are some of those areas? The outline mentioned a few different categories.
So they bring up a lot of examples, and a lot of them focus on right-leaning organizations and figures. They mention right-wing religious institutions, the Mayor GA movement, the Republican Party as a whole, even churches more broadly. And then they talk about these Mayor GA influencers who've been, accused of or even indicted for things related to exploiting children.
And there was something about the group Moms for Liberty, right?
Exactly. They talk about how some people connected to Moms for Liberty have been found to have, pasts involving sexual offenses against children. And then they also mention the indictment of Donald Trump's former spiritual advisor who was charged with molesting a child.
Okay, so it seems like their argument is if you're truly worried about protecting children, maybe there are other places, particularly in conservative circles, according to the transcript, where you should be focusing your attention.
Yeah, that's their main point. By bringing up all these examples, they're kind of drawing a contrast with Representative Greene's focus on NPR and PBS. It's like they're implying she's looking in the wrong place.
Yeah, it definitely paints a different picture of where the potential risks to children might be. Okay, so the last big point in the outline looks at the tone and the motivation behind Representative Greene's statements as seen by the transcript. And it sounds like the Ring of Fire has a pretty strong opinion on what she's really up to.
Yeah, they don't hold back at all. They basically accuse her of putting on a show and pretending to care about this issue, for the sake of publicity or something.
Wow, so they're really calling her out, and the outline even mentioned them calling her a demonic little monster.
Yeah, that's a direct quote from the transcript.
Yeah.
So you can definitely tell they're not fans of Representative Greene or her tactics.
Yeah.
And overall, they seem to believe that her actions are performative, designed to create controversy rather than genuinely coming from a place of concern for kids.
So it sounds like they're saying she's not being sincere.
That's the main takeaway for sure.
Okay, so to sum it all up, it seems like we've got Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene making these serious claims about NPR and PBS, brainwashing children with left-leaning content. She specifically mentions these alleged drag queen storytime events and the whole transing of children thing, and she even ties this all into the results of the 2024 election.
Right, and then we've got the transcript pushing back hard. They deny those claims, especially the drag queen storytime accusation, and they point out that Sesame Street is still going strong. They also say that transgender issues weren't actually a deciding factor in the 2024 election, like Representative Greene claims.
And on top of all that, they go on to suggest that there are other areas, particularly within right-leaning groups, where we should actually be worried about child safety. And they pretty much accuse Representative Greene of being insincere and politically motivated.
Yep. That's a good summary.
Yeah.
It's pretty clear that these two sides have very different perspectives on this whole thing. And all of this is just from this one YouTube transcript that we've been looking at.
Right. And it's important to remember that, everything we've talked about is based on this one specific source. It's just one viewpoint and one interpretation of what happened. So, keep that in mind as you're thinking about all of this.
Exactly. We always encourage you to do your own research and form your own opinions.
So as you're mulling all this over, there are a few questions that come to mind. What is the role of public media in our society? What are they responsible for? How do we evaluate accusations, especially when they're made in a political context? And how can we check if the information being presented is accurate? Where should we really be focusing our concern when it comes to children's well-being? And finally, what are the motivations behind these public statements on such politically charged issues? I mean, those are just some things to think about as you continue to explore this topic.
Definitely a lot to unpack there.
That's for sure.